As the sun rises over the snow-covered fields of the north, a sense of anticipation hangs in the frosty air. The people of Winterfell, wrapped in their furs, gather along the main road, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Children clamber onto rooftops and wagons, their breath fogging up in the cold as they strain to catch the first glimpse of the approaching party. From the distance, a faint rumble grows steadily louder. The first of the visitors appear over the horizon, a group of horsemen, their banners flapping in the wind. The stark black and red of the Targaryen sigil stands out against the white landscape, a dragon in flight. Following them is a massive horde of Dothraki screamers, their curved aurochs glinting in the morning light, a sight never before seen in the north. Behind them, the unsullied march in perfect unison, their spears and shields creating a rhythmic clatter that echoes off the walls of Winterfell. Their discipline and order are a stark contrast to the wild, untamed energy of the Dothraki. And then, the dragons. Drogon and Rhaegal soar overhead, their massive wings casting enormous shadows over the awestruck crowd. The people of Winterfell gasp and duck, their awe tinged with fear. The dragons circle the castle once, twice, their roars shaking the very ground beneath before they land gracefully near the front of the procession. At the heart of this grand procession are Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. Jon, dressed in the stark colors of his homeland, rides beside Daenerys, radiant and regal in her white and red attire. Their shared look speaks volumes, of understanding, of shared burdens, of a partnership forged in fire and ice. As they approach the gates of Winterfell, the crowd parts to reveal Sansa Stark, the Lady of Winterfell, waiting to receive them. Her face is a mask of courtesy, but her eyes betray her concern. This is a pivotal moment, a meeting of fire and ice, a beginning filled with promise and peril. And so, under the watchful eyes of the North, the Dragon Queen arrives at Winterfell, marking the start of a new, uncertain chapter in the saga of the Seven Kingdoms. The courtyard of Winterfell is bustling with activity, but amidst the chaos, a quiet corner by the heart tree offers a moment of respite. It is here that Jon Snow finds Sansa Stark, her fiery hair a stark contrast against the white bark of the weirwood tree. She turns at his approach, her face lighting up with a mixture of relief and joy. "Jon," she breathes out, rushing towards him. They embrace, a moment of warmth in the cold north. Sansa pulls back first, her hands lingering on Jon's arms as she takes in the sight of him. "You're really here," she murmurs, a soft smile gracing her lips. Jon returns her smile, his hand coming up to gently touch her cheek. "And you've kept the north safe," he replies, pride evident in his voice. Sansa's smile widens at his words, but there's a hint of sadness in her eyes. They sit by the heart tree, their breaths fogging up in the cold air as they share stories of their journeys. Sansa speaks of the challenges she faced as the Lady of Winterfell, her voice steady but her eyes revealing the weight of her responsibilities. Jon listens, his respect for his sister growing with each word. Jon then shares his own experiences of the Dragon Queen and the impending war. Sansa listens attentively, her concern for her brother evident in her furrowed brows. She promises Jon that she'll try to trust his judgment, but her worry for the North and its people is clear. As they part, Jon watches Sansa walk away, her figure growing smaller in the distance. He can't help but feel a pang of worry. The North is his home, and Sansa his family. As he turns to leave, he casts one last glance at the heart tree, its red leaves a stark reminder of the challenges that lie ahead. The great hall of Winterfell is filled to the brim, the lords and ladies of the North gathered in a semicircle around the high table. The room is abuzz with hushed whispers and anxious glances, the tension almost tangible. At the head of the room, Jon Snow rises, his gaze steady as he surveys the room. "Thank you all for coming," he begins, his voice echoing through the hall. The room falls silent, all eyes on him. "We gather here not as separate houses, but as one, as the North." His words hang heavy in the air, a reminder of the unity they need in the face of the impending threat. He speaks of the Night King, of the army of the dead marching towards them. His words paint a grim picture, but it's the truth they all need to hear. There are gasps, murmurs of disbelief, but Jon presses on. He speaks of the need for unity, for setting aside old grudges and working together. Beside him, Daenerys Targaryen rises to speak. She talks of her dragons, of the Dothraki screamers and the unsullied she has brought to fight for the North. She promises them victory, but only if they stand together. Her words are met with silence, then slow, reluctant nods of agreement. The meeting ends with a plan of action, a strategy for the battle to come. As the lords and ladies file out of the room, Jon and Daenerys share a look. It's a small victory, but it's a start. The North will stand together against the Night King, united under the banner of survival. In the quiet solitude of the Godswood, Jon Snow stands before the heart tree, his mind lost in thought. The rustling of leaves breaks his reverie, and he turns to see a familiar figure emerging from the shadows. Arya Stark, his little sister, now a young woman hardened by her experiences. Their eyes meet, and for a moment time seems to stand still. Then Arya breaks into a run, launching herself into Jon's arms. They embrace tightly, a silent testament to their bond. "You've grown," Jon murmurs, pulling back to look at Arya. She grins, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "So have you," she retorts, punching him lightly on the arm. They sit beneath the heart tree, sharing stories of their journeys. Arya speaks of her time in Braavos, of the faceless men and her list. Jon listens, his heart aching for the innocence his sister has lost. He tells her of his time beyond the wall, of the Night King and his army. Arya's face hardens at his words, her hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of needle. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, Jon and Arya stand. They share a final hug, a promise to protect each other, to stand together in the face of the coming storm. As Arya walks away, Jon watches her, his heart filled with a mix of pride and worry. His little sister has grown into a formidable woman, a warrior in her own right. But the war to come will test them all, and Jon can only hope they will be strong enough to face it. As night falls over Winterfell, Jon Snow finds himself drawn to the Godswood once again. The heart tree stands tall and silent, its red leaves rustling softly in the wind. Beneath it, in the flickering shadows, sits Bran Stark, his eyes distant and unfathomable. Jon approaches slowly, his footsteps crunching in the snow. "Bran," he greets, his voice soft. Bran turns to him, his gaze unsettling in its intensity. "Jon," he replies, his voice carrying a depth that belies his age. They sit in silence for a moment, the quiet only broken by the occasional hoot of an owl. Then, Bran begins to speak. He tells Jon of his journey beyond the wall, of the three-eyed raven and his transformation. His words are heavy with a wisdom that seems too great for his years. Jon listens, his mind struggling to comprehend the enormity of Bran's revelations. He asks about the Night King, about the threat they face. Bran's face hardens, his gaze distant as he speaks of the Night King's movements, of his relentless march towards the living. The weight of their conversation hangs heavy in the air as they part. Jon leaves the Godswood with a heavy heart, his mind filled with Bran's words. The threat of the Night King is real, and it's closer than they all think. As he walks away, he casts a final glance at Bran, still sitting beneath the heart tree, a solitary figure in the moonlit night. In the quiet solitude of the Winterfell library, Tyrion Lannister finds Sansa Stark gazing out of a window, her eyes lost in the snowy landscape. He approaches her, a respectful nod acknowledging her presence. "Lady Sansa," he greets, his voice echoing softly in the hushed room. Sansa turns, her gaze meeting Tyrion's. "Lord Tyrion," she replies, her voice cool yet not unkind. They share a moment of silence, the weight of their shared history hanging heavy in the air. Tyrion breaks the silence, his words a mix of apology and admiration. He speaks of their ill-fated marriage, of his regret for not being able to protect her. Sansa listens, her expression unreadable, but her eyes reflecting a quiet understanding. Sansa, in turn, speaks of her journey, of the trials she faced and the strength she found. She does not blame Tyrion, she says, for she knows he was not the cause of her suffering. Tyrion listens, his gaze filled with respect and a hint of sadness. Their conversation ends with a shared understanding, a mutual respect born out of their shared experiences. As Tyrion leaves the library, he casts a final glance at Sansa, a nod of respect. Sansa watches him leave, her mind filled with thoughts of the past and the uncertain future. In the crypts of Winterfell, amidst the cold stone statues of the Stark ancestors, Jon Snow stands before the statue of Lyanna Stark, his mother. The flickering torchlight casts long shadows, adding to the solemnity of the moment. Beside him, Samwell Tarly, his closest friend, carries a burden of truth that weighs heavy on his heart. Sam begins to speak, his voice echoing in the crypt. He tells Jon of his true parentage, of the secret that Ned Stark carried to his grave. "You're the true king, Jon," Sam says, his voice trembling with the enormity of his words. "Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, protector of the realm." Jon reels from the revelation, his mind struggling to comprehend the truth. He looks at Sam, his eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and shock. "My father, Ned Stark, he lied to me all my life?" Jon asks, his voice barely a whisper. Sam rushes to explain, telling Jon of the promise Ned made to Lyanna, of the danger that Jon would have been in had Robert Baratheon known the truth. "He did it to protect you, Jon," Sam says, his voice filled with conviction. As the truth sinks in, Jon is left in stunned silence. He looks at the statue of Lyanna, his mother, a new understanding in his eyes. The revelation shakes him to his core, but it also fills him with a sense of purpose. He is not just Jon Snow, the bastard of Winterfell. He is Aegon Targaryen, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, and with this truth comes a responsibility he cannot ignore. As dawn breaks over Winterfell, the castle comes alive with the sounds of preparation. The air is thick with anticipation, the tension palpable. Soldiers sharpen their swords, blacksmiths work tirelessly forging weapons, and archers practice their aim. Jon Snow, now aware of his true lineage, oversees the preparations, his gaze stern and focused. In the courtyard, Brienne of Tarth trains the new recruits, her voice ringing out clear and commanding. Podrick Payne, her squire, stands by her side, assisting and learning. Nearby, Arya Stark practices with her staff, her movements swift and precise. Inside the castle, Sansa Stark and Daenerys Targaryen discuss strategies. Their minds focused on the impending battle, they are joined by Tyrion Lannister and Ser Davos Seaworth, their counsel valued and respected. In the Godswood, Bran Stark sits in quiet contemplation, his mind far beyond the walls of Winterfell. Theon Greyjoy stands guard, his loyalty unwavering. They are preparing in their own way, their roles crucial in the battle to come. As the day ends, the castle is abuzz with a grim determination. The battle for the dawn is near, and Winterfell stands ready. Each individual, from the highest lord to the lowest servant, is prepared to fight, to defend their home. The night is dark and full of terrors, but Winterfell is full of warriors. As dusk falls over Winterfell, the distant sound of a horn pierces the evening air. 3 long blasts echo across the castle, sending a chill down the spines of those who hear it. The night's watch has arrived. At the castle gates, Jon Snow waits, his heart pounding in his chest. The gates creak open, revealing a weary band of brothers led by Edison Tollet. Their faces are etched with fatigue, their eyes haunted, but they stand tall, their black cloaks billowing in the wind. Jon steps forward, clasping Ed's arm in a firm grip. "You made it," he says, relief evident in his voice. Ed nods, his gaze meeting Jon's. "We are the shield that guards the realms of men," he replies, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. The men of the Night's Watch dismount, their horses led away to the stables. They are welcomed warmly, given food and drink, their wounds tended to. They bring with them tales of the Wall, of the relentless advance of the Night King's army. Their stories send a shiver through the hall, a stark reminder of the threat they face. The scene ends with Jon and Ed standing on the battlements watching as the last light of day fades from the sky. The arrival of the Night's Watch has bolstered their forces, but the battle is far from won. As the darkness descends, they stand together, ready to face whatever comes with the dawn.